So we continue with the Sermon on the Mount. We began with the Beatitudes last week. And the theme really is light. What kind of light should we have and should we offer to the world? Christ's light, yes, but well, let's look at the example of Paul in the second reading today. He insists, and we remember this from last week's reading too, he insists he's not coming among the Corinthians with, worldly wisdom, shining light, that kind of human light, which can dazzle but not really change your heart. Scholars point out that Paul, at this moment when he came to Corinth, was just coming from Athens, not too far away. And he gave a brilliant speech on the Areopagus, right up there by the Parthenon. You can read it in the Acts of the Apostles. It's quite impressive. But he didn't make any more than one or two converts. So Paul realized, what he said last week to the Corinthians, God shows what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. So he says today, I didn't come among you with any words of human wisdom, not that kind of light. And then he goes on to say even something a little more surprising even. He doesn't come, with, pomp and circumstance or, any kind of pretense. He says, I came among you with fear and trembling. This was way beyond me. So that's what he also said last week. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. So Paul recognizes his own human weakness as an asset to allow the light of God to come. He says later in his second letter to the Corinthians, I realized God said, my power is perfect in weakness, made perfect in weakness, so I boast of my weaknesses, he says. I boast of my weaknesses. How many people do that? I boast of my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. So Paul is close to his own humanity, and that's where the light comes in, and that's where the light goes out to others in the weakness of their humanity. In other words, into our authenticity, our poor, weak humanity, which we shouldn't be afraid of, but we should present as a claim to God's light and life and love. So we can't have the pretense of the holiness of, I have my religious practice and I'm fine, that makes me great. Well, hopefully it does make you great, but not in the way you think. If you look at this first reading, this passage from Isaiah 58 has been used for centuries in the first days after Ash Wednesday. We'll see it again this year. To remind us where the authenticity of our practice of Lent and of our Christian practices of our human life should really lie. And if you read just a few verses before where today's reading begins, God is reproaching those, say, I'm fasting for God, just like the Pharisee in the gospel who says, I fast twice a week. I may not great, I may not strong, I may not wise. And God reproaches the person because here you are, you're fasting, and meanwhile you get into all sorts of arguments and fist fights, and you cheat your workers, and so this is the fast I want? God asks. No, and then we get what we see today. No, to break the yoke, of those who are suffering, to feed the hungry, to not turn your back. And the expression is very poignant in Hebrew. Don't turn your back on your own flesh. Basar in Hebrew is the weakness of flesh. The word became flesh. So be close to the weakness of your humanity in yourself and in others. Again, not religious practice for its own sake. If your religious practice, and that goes for us, not just for the people God is addressing in Isaiah, if it's not bringing you closer to your humanity and to others' humanity, drop it or change it. It's not working. A priest mentor of mine pointed out, with this gospel today about being the salt of the earth, He said, you don't sit down with a bowl of salt, do you? And eat a bowl of salt, that'll be the end of your blood pressure, as we know. So that's like religious practice. It's like salt. You don't eat the salt. The salt is meant to season your food. It's meant to season and make savory and make beautiful your life. It's not meant to be eaten for its own sake, religious practice. It's meant to be spread out and to season your life and to make others' lives tasty and savory and beautiful. So that's the kind of practice we should have. And that's the kind of light we should bring to the world. And that's what the first reading points out for us. It says, if you do all these things, you feed the hungry, you clothe the naked, then your light shall break forth like the dawn. The Lord shall be your rear guard. Your darkness, and we all have that, will become like midday if you are close to your own flesh, so to speak. And isn't that what Jesus said finally in the end too? How we'll be judged. You remember Matthew 25 where you have the sheep and the goats, and you notice that the King Jesus doesn't say, "Come, righteous of my Father, you said the rosary every day, you came to Mass, every Sunday." He doesn't say that, does he? Hopefully that will help us to do what he does ask about, which is, did you feed me when I was hungry and give me drink when I was thirsty? Did you clothe me when I was naked and welcome me when I was a stranger equals immigrant? Notice. Did you visit me in prison? A horrible prison system. Did you visit me in the hospital? We didn't. When were you? Anytime you did it to the very least, weakest, poorest, you did it to me. Or did you not recognize me in the weakness of my humanity? That's where I was. Very well find me in the tabernacle, but find me in the hospital and in the prison. That's what matters. That's what it all is supposed to lead to. I just noticed, looking over that first reading today, again, there's a marvelous juxtaposition of words in Hebrew, the word order of the Hebrew. It says, spend yourself for the oppressed self. And the two words for self, nefesh, nafshika and nefesh, are right next to each other. The word order has been modified so that a nefesh is the word for our poor humanity. Humanity became a living being in Genesis. Nefesh chai. That's the word. So it's our precious little humanity. And the two humanities, the two nafshim, are right next to each other. And that's what should happen. Our humanities should be right next to each other. Close to each other. Not ashamed of each other. Not exploitative, much less, of each other. But close. So are we close to the poor and the sick and the imprisoned and the immigrant and the hungry and the thirsty? It's our humanity. Do not despise your own flesh. It's your flesh. We're one body. One body. That's also what the Eucharist is supposed to be, right? Eucharistic revival. Okay. So are we one body? Are we present? Really present? That's what we're talking about, right? The real presence. Are we really present to each other in our humanity in the one body of Christ, which we all are? That's how we're the light of the world. That's how we're the salt of the earth. Or not.